Alright guys, what's going on? It's Jack and welcome back to another video. So tomorrow we are going to be getting a new patch, which is actually going to be significant. Now I'm going to be basically reading this off to you here, and I'm not going to be putting anything on screen, so that way you could just focus on what your eyes are seeing and you can just listen to my voice in terms of the info. But I will also be putting the link of the patch notes in the description as well as the first comment. So without further ado, let's get into this because it is decently hefty and it is important. So first, they go into gameplay. Number 1, fix the delay in reloading, swapping, or deploying devices caused by players rapidly tapping the fire and ability buttons. Number 2, players who took advantage of a speed hack will now find themselves locked in place, which is the opposite of what they were going for. Next, they're talking about factions. Number 1, after coming to an agreement with the pharmaceutical company GSK, the Team Rainbow faction will hereafter be known as the GS Commando. Feel free to continue calling them the Grenshiju Commando, I can't read that, as a handy time to savor. Number 2, fix an issue where DedSec Spiderbots were ignoring victims previously targeted by the deploying player. Now they'll spider hug faces, new and old, with equal enthusiasm. Number 3, players can once again shoot DedSec Spiderbots off of their own faces. Not sure why, everybody loves Spiderbots. Number 4, tune the functionality of Echelon's intel suit. Now it pulses every hour, or excuse me, not every hour, every 4 seconds instead of every 3. Enemies remain highlighted for 1 second instead of 2.7 seconds. So everybody pay attention. Okay, so that's a little bit of a nerf there. Next, number 5, some abilities such as Firebomb, the Digital Ghillie Suit, and the BioVita Boost weren't always activating or occasionally stopped working. That's fixed. Next, they talk about maps. Fixed a weird issue letting players exit a Times Square spawn zone early by jumping off a picture frame. Next, we got game modes. Number 1, updated the playlist screen to show all of the available game modes. Number 2, added menu text clarifying that bronze rank unlocks at the first victory. Number 3, fixed an issue that was displaying a little padlock icon on rank rewards despite players earning them fair and square. Next, they talk about weapons. So here we go. Now we're getting to the real juicy stuff. All right, number 1, tune various weapons for gameplay balance. So here are the spec changes for your records. Number 1, M4A1 short range damage increased from 17 to 18, so that's a buff. MDR short range damage increased from 17 to 19, another buff. The MP5 medium range damage increased from 13 to 14. Its headset multiplier increased from 1.35x to 1.4x. So that's a buff. The MP5 short range increased from 16 to 18. Its medium range increased from 25 meters to 27 meters. So that's another buff. The MDR ADS speed improved from 300 milliseconds to 250 milliseconds. So that's a buff. The M44 sprint out times, which is a sprint to shoot time, increased from 350 to 400 milliseconds, so that's a nerf. The TAC-50 sprint out time increased from 600 milliseconds to 625 milliseconds, so that's a nerf. The L115 sprint out time increased from 550 milliseconds to 575 milliseconds, so that's another nerf. And the sniper rifles, which is the M44, the TAC-50, and the L115, got a small increase in spread when shooting from the hip, as opposed to aiming via the optics. So when you listen to that, all sniper rifles have pretty much been given a nerf in that department, as well as the 4 previous things that we mentioned, specifically in the ADS speed and the sprint out time for certain weapons, and sprint to shoot time as well. All right, moving on. Improve the visual presentation of tracer fire and ammo case injection, so both depart more accurately from their respective weapon. Next, adjusted how the aiming system detects player input so that recoil recovery returns to center rather than being thrown off by unintended player jitters in the heat of combat. Next, fixed a glitch that allowed players to fire automatically upon respawning if they jammed on the fire and sprint buttons while dying. Okay, next they talk about audio, graphical and audio fixes, various, and that's pretty much it. And then now we have miscellaneous. Number 1, corrected the kill screen HP value from 1 to 0 of players who killed other players post-mortem via a well-placed proximity mine, incendiary rounds, or similarly present offensive strategies. Number 2, previously players with pings higher than 150 milliseconds were kept waiting at unfun amount of time in matchmaking. We've improved the matchmaking parameters so their ping is assessed in more frequently, which should greatly reduce the matchmaking wait times. Also, players of any quality can now instantly jump into the practice zone where they can take out their ping frustrations in a healthy and constructive way. This was great. This was actually something that was requested for a while now, and I'm glad that this actually got implemented. So while you're waiting for a match, now you can just go into practice zone without ever having to exit out. This is awesome. And of course, the last but not least thing, and that is crash fixes, which are various. All right, so that pretty much concludes the patch notes. So it looks like we're getting a few, like the Intel suit's getting a nerf, all the snipers are pretty much getting a nerf across the board, and as well as other adjustments. And we got weapons that are getting a buff, which is great, which was something that I wanted. I wanted the M4 to get a buff. I wanted the MDR to get a buff. So all right, so it looks like we've got a few bug fixes, of course, like when you respawn, you know, your weapon's not going to fire, so that's great. So pretty much, in my opinion, overall, in conclusion here, this is a step in the right direction. And of course, with the Spiderbot, we can now shoot that thing off our faces, which is great. And of course, for people that are even using the Spiderbot, they should be working a lot more efficiently now. So this patch is going to go live tomorrow, which is great. So I think it's actually significant. I'm really glad that we're getting it now. As a matter of fact, I wasn't expecting anything like this for, I'd say, at least a couple more weeks, but I'm glad that they got it. And the fact that we're getting some weapon tuning adjustments is great, and some faction tuning adjustments, that's great too. And other than the sniper rifles, they're not really doing anything too crazy in terms of how aggressively they're going to buff or nerf weapons, apart from the sniper rifles. But my thing is this: the only thing I have to say to snipers is that if they're nerfing them to this degree, I mean, granted, I don't think it's like a night and day difference, but it is a difference enough to where they won't be as cheesy. But I will say this though, like if they're nerfing all the snipers across the board like this, then I have to say that I guess their data that they've accumulated ever since the game's release says that this actually needs to be a thing. And obviously it seems to be the right thing, because a lot of players have complained about it, except for the players that are not snipers, except for the players that are snipers. And specifically, another thing that points in the right direction is the fact that out of all the weapons that I wanted to get buffed, those weapons were the MDR and the M4. So I'm glad that those two are getting a buff. And of course, the MP5 also got a buff as well, because if you think about it, it's actually like one of the more least used SMGs. I know that there's a few of you that use it quite a bit, but for the most part, I would say it's probably the most least used. And because it's a little weak sauce in that area, I'm glad that it got a buff in that kind of aspect. So anyway, with that being said, guys, what do you guys think of this update? I know that not everybody's going to be happy. Not everybody is when it comes to updates like this. But is this more of a good thing for you? Is it more of a positive thing, or is it more of a negative thing? I would love to know down in the comment section below. And as always, I'd like to thank everybody for taking the time to watch and or listen. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.